Welcome back, everyone. Am I on? Welcome back, everyone. Mario is going to give us a rundown on threat modeling the Death Star. And threat modeling is a really useful skill, so you also know where to expend all your efforts. So please welcome Mario.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to my talk, Threat Modeling the Death Star. Just a first introduction. Mario, I have been a developer for 10 years. Recently, I moved to security, and nowadays I'm a security engineer at Landy. So my developer background helps me see security from the eyes of a developer, right? And I want to talk about threat modeling because it's a subject that is a bit dry, it's a bit hard, but I think it's very important to any developers to know about it. First things first. Star Wars is not my thing. It belongs to Disney. I don't want to be chased by Disney, so please, it's nothing mine, right? Cool. Just a quick introduction about what's a threat modeling. And first, InfoSec, as a community, they agree that threat modeling should be done. How and what exactly is threat modeling? It's kind of not very well defined yet. So that's one of the many definitions I found. I like the definition the most. These definitions talk about a process that helps to identify, enumerate, prioritize threats from a hypothetical attacker's point of view. And I really like the attacker point of view in this case. That process can be many different processes. So there are one that's called stride. That's a very checklist. You go verify each one of your threats. Security cards, pasta. The one I feel works better for developers, the one I feel when I try with developers it works best is attack trees. So I'm going to use Star Wars to talk about attack trees, right? Cool. Star Wars. Let's talk about Star Wars and threat modeling. That story starts with you in the audience. You just became the CSO of the Galactic Empire. Chief Security Officer. Well done. After so many years of hard working, you started as a stormtrooper, now you're all the way to the top as a Chief Security Officer. That's the good news. The bad news, this guy is your boss. And he kind of doesn't like that culture of blameless culture, you know? It's not his thing, so you better not fail, right? That's what happened to your predecessor, by the way. But what's in your favor is, come on, you are working for the Galactic Empire, the biggest and most powerful organization in the galaxy. They bring stability to the galaxy, and sometimes they need to fight those terrorists, the rebellion. But come on, it's the Galactic Empire. You are well protected. On the other hand, the Galactic Empire has terrible security, and that's a footage of the rebellion droid actually hacking into the Empire network. So you have kind of some work to do. And your biggest problem right now is the Death Star. And any big waterfall project, this project has been 20 years in the making, has spent 2 trillion credits. So it's overdue, over budget. The business is not happy with all these delays. And you need to secure it, right? To make things harder, the previous CSO didn't do anything about the security of the Death Star, so it's all on you. Good luck. So we're going to start talking about attack trees. And attack trees, I see as first 4 steps, right? And then we're going to go through all of them. One is evil personas, and think about attacker. We need to define what's an attacker. We're going to go through that. Get the right people in the room, and that's very, very important. If you're going to do a threat modeling, you cannot do only with your security team. Your security team has only one end goal of the things you're building, or the Death Star in this case. You need to have your developers as well. Or if you have operations team, you need to have the operations team in the room as well. If the whole minds combined, they'll come up with a nice and good attack tree. Then we're going to build the trees, and then we're going to go in very detail about that. When we build the attack trees, we're going to come up with a few risks, right? And then we need to think about how we're going to mitigate those. Cool. Let's talk about evil personas. The first one, Script Kiddie, right? Jar Jar Binks. No much expertise. It doesn't have much resources. They don't organize themselves very well. To be honest, they are not like a threat to the empire. But it's good to map them. They are there. The next one is a bounty hunter, Han Solo, right? They usually have some expertise in some areas. Like they might be very good to traffic something, or they are very good in kill something. So they have some level of expertise. They have some resources, maybe an old Millennium Falcon store somewhere, but they don't have much more than that usually. And they don't organize themselves pretty well. They usually work alone or by pairs, so they don't work together very closely. So they might be a threat, but usually they're more an annoyance kind of a threat. And then you have this one. And the expertise of these guys, come on, they do magic, right? How you defend against magic? Like, it's not possible. Hopefully, and that's a hope, you heard some legends that your boss now, Darth Vader, kill all of them. They don't exist anymore. So you just hope they're not there, right? If they are there, they are hidden from the galactic empire. They don't have much resources. They are probably hidden in a planet far, far away. So they don't organize themselves very well. They don't have insider threat, right? And then I'm just representing this as a one persona. But you can have from a small, low-rank stormtrooper to like a high officer in the rank. So they all can be like insider threats. So I'm just putting one persona to make things like quicker. They have some level of expertise. After all, they have been trained by the Galactic Empire, the best organization in the galaxy. They might have like very good resources, especially if you're on the high ranks of the empire. And they know how to organize themselves pretty well if they want to. They have like military training, so that makes themselves like, a bit dangerous. And finally, you have nation-state attackers. That's Princess Leia, right? She is like the leader of the rebellion, terrorist organization, that's funded by some planets, right? And that's why it's a nation-state attacker. So they can like afford to have lots of expertise, they have lots of resources, and they can organize themselves very well for a terrorist organization. Cool? So they are the 5 attackers we have at the moment. So you define that, your first job as a CSO, so you know who are the people who can attack you. That's really good. Now, you need to get the right people in the room to discuss the Death Star, right? And then you start with this lovely gentleman. That's the engineer team of the Death Star. That's a picture of the Rogue One, by the way. So you got all of them in a room. So and with your security team, you even managed to get Darth Vader in the room, like to give them a bit of motivation to help you and build the attack tree. It was a really hard meeting to schedule, though, because now you're having people from all over the galaxy, and the Darth Vader's agenda is quite busy, so there is that. Cool. So now we're going to talk about attack trees. What attack trees are? Usually we start with a goal that is attacker goal. That's the root node. Then you start to branch it out in different ways how you can accomplish the goal. So each branch is usually a different option. Cool? We're going to go more in details about that now. So we first discuss, based on the personas you have, what kind of goals they can achieve if they're attacking the Death Star, and they are very bad for the Empire. You can talk about like steal resources, steal intelligence, go over many, many goals. But the 2 goals that are more dangerous for the Empire is somebody takes control of the Death Star. That's horrible. Or they manage to get Death Star out of the action. After 20 years in the making, it's all done. And then like they need to start back again. But if we go back to our like personas, take control of Death Star is highly unlikely. And that's because you need a 2 million people crew on the Death Star. That's a lot of people. It's high advanced technology, and it's very expensive to maintain. So your most likely persona to take control of the Death Star is Princess Leia. And even though the rebellion probably doesn't have the resources to do that, even for them, it's quite expensive. So we're going to focus on take Death Star out of action. Right? We're going to get rid of the Death Star out of the board. So, and then again, you come up with lots of different options how you can accomplish that. And these two are the most likely options that you found out about. You can disable the dev star. And when we're talking about disable, I'm not talking about disable in a sense like you turn off the dev star for 5 minutes. You are disabled in a way that to enable the dev star back again is so expensive that you might as well just buy a new one. Like when you crack your iPhone screen, right? To repair your iPhone screen, you might as well get a new iPhone. So that's kind of disablement we're talking about here. Or you can just plain destroy the dev star, right? So let's focus a little bit on how to disable the dev star. Then, again, many options were discussed, and 2 options come up. One is looking at critical systems on the dev star and compromise those systems. Maybe it's the heat system, navigation system, the communication system. Whatever system, you compromise in such a way and you disable in such a way that's so really hard to get the dev star back up. Or you can cause a mechanical failure. In some way, like some critical system that you don't destroy the dev star, but it's enough to stop everything and just rebuild the whole thing. That probably means like it's multiple mechanical failures and multiple compromise of systems. But there is still a likelihood to happen. All right. To have the systems failure, you need to compromise these critical IT systems, right? You cannot do that by just being a power user. The system protects against that. You need to get a root inside those systems and try to compromise them in such a way. Maybe you just to run somewhere, encrypted everything, throw the keys away, you remove the backups, you do whatever you want. And for the mechanical failure, you need to overload some sort of critical infrastructure. And then again, heat system might be one, make everyone be very warm on the dev star. You can talk about the reactor, you can talk about many different systems on the dev star. However, and then that's where we need to be very clear about. The dev star is not a usual software system we have. It's a weapon. And as a weapon, they don't expose much to the public, right? They expose very little. So how these systems are behind an impressive firewall, let's say that, you need to get privileged access to the internal network. That's the only way. And remember, we are talking about light years of distance. So your ping from a machine in one planet, it'll take maybe 2 days to get on the dev star, right? So we need to get access to the internal network. And the only way to get that is to get physical access to the dev star. And then we could go further, then try to think about how would you want to get access to the dev star? Internal access, physical access. But remember, we have 2 million people crew. That's not very hard. And one of our personas is an internal threat, right? So we're not going to go further on that branch, and let's move to another branch of the tree. That's all we have so far, right? We have take the dev star out of the action. You want to disable the dev star. You come up with 2 different ways. And sometimes that happens when we're doing attack trees. They come up in the funnel, in the same branch. And that's very interesting because it means that attacks if the attacker comes to that route, you give them many options to accomplish their goal. So you need to think really, really hard about that threat. But for now, let's move to the next way to take dev star out of the action, which is destroy the dev star. Right? And destroy the dev star is really, really hard. The first one is a military attack, right? Like the rebellion have a big fleet of ships. They can come up and just shoot the dev star until it's completely destroyed. That's likely to happen. They most likely do that when they discover that dev star is there. Or you can destroy the reactor. And to destroy the reactor is hard. Because you need to shoot a thermal port, and that's an error that happened on the design level of the dev star. So for the dev star has the reactor on the very core, and there's a thermal port to get the heating out of the reactor that goes all the way to the outside of dev star. If some pilot can manage to shoot a torpedo in there, you destroy the dev star. But this shot, it's really, really hard because the thermal port's just 2 meters wide. And they need to know where it is, right? So they need to actually also obtain the Death Star plans. Cool? So that's the other branch of the attack tree of the Death Star. And that's the whole Death Star together, the whole attack tree, sorry. And then you have pretty much 3 big risks in there. One, to get privileged access to internal network. Second one is the military attack. And the third one is that thermal port. So let's talk about how would we mitigate those risks. Privileged access to the network, right? Impact critical. If you can go to the privileged access to the network, you can disable the Death Star, and that's really critical for the Empire. Like, you don't want that to happen. And to be honest, given like the secure practices of the Empire, the likelihood is medium. You can put like, if you come up with a droid inside the Death Star battle station, connect to the network, done. So we need to do something about it, the CSO, right? Then you come up with some mitigations. You come up with a better authentication authorization, something better than I have a white helmet, I'm a stormtrooper, I'm going in, right? You might as well use Auth0 and the door that we talked about in the morning. They might have the RFC card or something. That was really good. You have defense in depth. It's not because you are inside the Death Star. Doesn't mean like you can access to everything. So you try to put more controls. You do proper pen testing in your systems. You do mitigation, network segregation. How the best practices you have in the network, you can apply to the Death Star. And make it really, really hard for a person that's inside the Death Star get access to the internal network, a privileged access to internal network. So then, something that was medium, the likelihood is medium, is now low. The impact is still critical, but that's what you can do at the moment. So moving on. A military attack. So impact is critical. If a rebellion can pull off a military attack strong enough to destroy the Death Star, the impact is critical. And the likelihood is high. Let's be honest. As soon as they learn the Death Star exists, they're going to try to destroy it. And the most likely way is just get all the ships they have and try to blow up the Death Star. What you can do about it to mitigate this risk? One, you can have like incident response kind of procedures inside the Death Star. As soon as a military attack happens, the people in the Death Star need to respond very quickly. You get Star Destroyers on call. Star Destroyers, for the people who don't know, is the capital ships of the Galactic Empire. They are huge, really powerful. So you can have like some sort of PagerDuty kind of thing. If a military attack happens, they can fly to the Death Star and support the Death Star in a military attack. And you can monitor rebellion activities, right? The best way to avoid a military attack is if you know before that. So you set up all that infrastructure, you set up the PagerDuty kind of thing, make sure like there is better protection, and you manage to mitigate the risk. So now it's only a high. So even if a rebellion can come up with a stronger military attack, if they Star Destroyers, you think you can safely move away with the Death Star. It's still damaged, but not destroyed. So it's critical for high. And the likelihood now is medium, right? Because now the rebellion knows you have better protections. They're not very likely to waste their whole fleet just to not have what they want. And finally, shoot at the thermal port. And that one is the most complicated kind of risk. Because the likelihood is low. It's low because it's a really hard shot. And also, you are kind of relying in security through obscurity. You're kind of relying that the rebellion doesn't know about that, right? Of course, you as a CSO try to protect against that. But the projects are already overdue. It's already over budget. You manage to put that likelihood low. The business said, I accept the risk, right? I accept the risk. So the only thing you can do is get the Death Star plans and move to the Imperial Security Complex. It's like a big vault, a planet-sized vault, where you just put all your planes in there, and then you hope that nothing happens. That's the best you can do. Of course, what happens? And how, right? you need to understand how. So you do a forensic analysis, right? This guy, he's the how. So first, he's a bloody Jedi. They're not supposed to be dead or something? All right. Then he got help from Han Solo about Hunter. But they're not supposed to be doing these kind of things, right? Like, they only get money. Why did he do that? And then it gets worse, because he's Princess Leia's brother. So, wait a minute. It's a Jedi. That's Princess Leia's brother. So it's kind of like two personas together. And it gets worse, because he's also son of your boss. So it's kind of like a special persona, let's say that. Huh? Also, what also happens is your vault, your Imperial security complex, is not very secure. That's footage of people going and getting the hard drive of the plans, right? Of the Death Star plans. The hard drive wasn't encrypted. I told you to have a very hard job. So that's the forensic analysis, right? So what you can learn from that? That's at least something you can learn. Thread model early and often. So the Death Star was a huge project, and also happens when you do big softwares. They are also spent for over years. So if you do only one thread modeling, that's not enough. You need to do early and often. If you have done the thread modeling early, you might be able to fix the thermal port problem. If you did at the design level, you might as well just change the design, fix there. That's a lot more cheaper you fix on the design level than if you fix right before the production. Right? So you could like protect yourselves better. Also, there are always unknowns. Come on, who would think about Luke Skywalker? The Jedis were dead, and why did your boss never told you that he had a son? And his sister is like the rebellion princess. So there are always unknowns, right? Security through obscurity is a terrible idea, right? Sometimes that happens, and I have seen many times we're going to discuss vulnerabilities of developers. They come and say to me, oh, but you'll never know about that. That's so hidden. No, man. That doesn't happen. When you do attack trees, it's best come with the assumption the attacker knows as much as you do. It's the best way. Because if they want to know as much as you do, they will. If he's attacker that have the resources and the capabilities to do that, they will. Just compromise on the developer's machine, go to Confluence. It's not that hard, huh? No need to like hack the Imperial security complex or anything like that. Finally, that's why I like attack trees, right? It's like, as I said, maybe it's not for everyone. Not like every single scenario, the attack trees are the best scenario. But why I like attack trees? First, it's a fun exercise. You make developers or whatever defenders think like attackers. It's a very good change of mindset. So you spend years and years just building software, defending your software, but how about you think about for an hour or two how to hack your own software? And that's very interesting. It's very eye-opening for the developers. They might come up with like, oh, wait a minute, I can do that, and you should have this in this control, but we don't. So maybe we should have. Right? It's also a problem-solving exercise. And come on, developers, they are problem solvers by default, right? You put a problem in front of developers, what they're going to do? Solve it. Doesn't matter what it is. If you talk about rocket science, they're going to try to solve it. And that's very fun. You compare like to other ways to try the model, for example, Stride, that's more of a checklist. Developers get bored very easily. If it's a process you want to do early and often, it needs to be something they are likely to do and likely to feel good about it. At least not hate it. And I think Stride can make that a bit hard. And it's a very interesting exercise. If you get the right people in the room, you have everyone who is building that software, developer, security, operations, to talk about security for 1 or 2 hours. And that's really, really powerful, because when you leave the room, You're going to talk about those risks. Everybody got together on the same conclusion. If something was critical, it's really hard for a developer to say, no, that's not critical. Come on, you're in the room. We discussed that together. This is critical. Remember that. Remember the discussion. So when you need to prioritize that back to the developer's backlog, it's a lot easier. They understand. They were there. Maybe it was their suggestion. All right? That's it for my talk. May the force be with you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think that's the most entertaining version of threat modeling I've ever seen. And I think you need to share this video when it shows up, probably tomorrow at this point, with all your colleagues. Do we have any questions? We've got go away notifications. We've got a couple of minutes, so we can fit a few in.
Yeah, fantastic presentation.
Thank you.
Have you tried this, I guess, approach for threat modeling, possibly even actually using a Death Star example with people who aren't normally engaged, like, I don't know, the executive or the business, or people who aren't as strongly technical?
Sometimes product managers I tried, but usually the example I try is rob a bank. It's just for science. It's not like I'm trying to get any ideas or something. But it's something, I try to use something, that's one of the benefits of the attack trees, different from Stride, for example. You can apply in different ways. And bank, something that everybody thinks about. You go to a bank branch, everybody knows how it works, and everybody thinks about the security, and then you go to a branch like, oh, I could do this, I could try to steal the money from here. Everybody has this kind of ideas, and it's very interesting to hear about them. Some ideas are pretty hard, it's like, wow. You actually thought about that. So yeah, it's an interesting way. But I usually, even for developers, if the first time I'm running through them, I go to an example that's quick and easy, so they get the idea how the process works, and then we go for the software. If you just talk about attack trees, if you don't give an example, it's really hard to reason about, goals and branches and then how it goes. But if you do something that's quick and easy, usually they get the idea.
We can probably fit in one more if there's anyone with a question.
Anyone? Same.
If no one else minds. I guess the other thing I've seen occasionally happen with threat modeling is it focuses very much on the technical points of entry, like a very low level, like MITRE ATT&CK style defensiveness. How do you get the right people in the room for the possible goals and motivations and really understanding what's making people tick and understanding those options?
That's a complicated question. So the way I like to think about it is what you're trying to protect, right? Whatever it is. If you're trying to talk about software, usually means developers, operations, and some other people. If you're talking about the security of your office, you might come up with the office manager as well, and the people and the InfoSec people in your organization. So it depends what you're trying to protect against. You need to get different people, and they might get a bit intimidated at first, what is that about? Why am I here? So you need to get a good introduction of the process, why the people are there, and hopefully they have some fun doing it. But yeah, does that answer your question?
Thanks again.
Thank you.
Round of applause, and then I'll let you all go.